All right, so we're in 1 Samuel chapter 18 today. Again, page 198, and I'm going to jump right in and start reading. The words are up on the screen if you're still looking for that, but let's read this together. 1 Samuel 18. After David had finished talking with Saul, Jonathan became one in spirit with David, and he loved him as himself. From that day, Saul kept David with him and did not let him return home to his family. And Jonathan made a covenant with David because he loved him as himself. Jonathan took off the robe he was wearing and gave it to David, along with his tunic and even his sword, his bow, his belts. Whatever mission Saul sent him on, David was so successful that Saul gave him a high rank in the army. This pleased all the troops and Saul's officers as well. The men were returning home after David had killed the Philistine. The women came out from all the towns. This was a custom after battle. These hired women would come they had practiced music and stuff. So they come out to meet Saul with singing and dancing, with joyful songs, with timbrels and lyres. And as they danced, they sang, this is the song they sang, Saul has slain his thousands, and David his 10,000s. Saul was very angry. This refrain displeased him greatly. They have credited David with 10,000s, he thought, but me with only thousands? What more can he get but the kingdom? And from that time on, Saul kept a close eye on David. Things just got dicey. As we started this chapter, we were introduced to three different characters. Let me just briefly run through these three main characters in the story today, and they're going to come up the rest of we're going to read as much as we can of chapter 18 and 19, though we don't have time for all of it. So the first, of course, is Saul. He's the king, and not only is he the king of Israel, he is the very first king Israel has ever had. So no pressure. But he's the one that's setting the tone. He's the one that's setting the culture. He's establishing policies and an administration and a military strategy. He's the one that's setting the tone for the kingdom as well as the dynasty. He's the first dynasty of Israel. So he has hopes of his son one day becoming king and his grandson, his great-grandson. I mean, no pressure, but he's the first king. This is kind of a big deal. Another character in the story is Prince Jonathan. This is Saul's son. And we'll talk about this a little bit in a minute, but he's kind of a no-brainer to take on the kingship, to be the next king of Israel. He's already proven he's great in the military. He's cut his teeth in government work. He's bold, he's brave, he's energetic. He's a great leader. People love him. They respect him. They like him. So he's the obvious next in line. He's of royal descent, of course. And then we have David. He's a kid. He's the youngest of 8 brothers. He's not in the military. His brothers are. He shows up on the battlefield one day, and according to Saul, it looks like he kind of has a stroke of luck, and he knocks down the giant. And all of a sudden, everybody's focus is on this boy named David. He's basically a nobody who's very quickly becoming a somebody. And the text shifts from last chapter. Pastor George preached on the battle of David and Goliath. This is where the passage really flips, and it now becomes about the battle of Saul and David. And that's going to be for the next several chapters. And here's a question that I think all of us can identify with and wrestle with. Here's the question that we want to talk about today. What should you do when someone is better than you? What should you do when someone is better than you? Saul is the king. Hey, he's killed his thousands, but David has killed his 10,000s. This kid comes on the scene, he throws a rock that magically knocks down a giant. All of a sudden, everybody's singing these songs about him. Pop stations all over the nation are picking up this new song. Saul's killed his thousands. David is 10,000s. So here's this kid. But Saul has to wrestle with the fact that David's better. He's younger. He's less experienced. He doesn't understand politics the way that Saul does. He doesn't have the connections that Saul does. On and on and on you could go. But David he's better. And so what is Saul going to do now that he's encountered someone that is better than him? All of us can identify with this, right? I mean, has this ever happened to you? When have you encountered someone that was just better than you? I tell you, the first time it happened to me was my senior year of high school. Here's a picture of my soccer team. It's a bit grainy. This is the best picture I could find. I'm the handsome guy in the middle there. And so I'm on the soccer team, and I played soccer for 4 years of high school. I was never very athletic. I was never very good at really any sport that I picked up. except chess. That's not a sport, though. So I was never very good at any sports. However, when I was in high school, I was very diligent, okay? I did work very hard, and I practiced very hard. After practice, all the other kids would go home, and I would stay on the field. I would run drills. On my off days, on summer vacation, I would run for miles, usually several miles every single day that I had off, or almost every single day. Sometimes I would dribble a soccer ball with me. I played basketball. I was terrible at basketball, but I would practice on the off teams. When everybody was gone, I'd turn the lights on in the gym, right? I was diligent. You may be better than me, but I'm going to outrun you, right? That was the only thing that I could control was my stamina because I could just work hard. And for 3 years, 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, for 3 years, I sat the bench. I did my time. I filled up the little, we had these little 2-ounce cups. I would fill them up with water for, the seniors would come off the field, and I'd hand them the little water cups because I knew one day I'm going to be a senior. And so finally, this year here, I was a senior. The first couple games, I get to start, and I loved the feeling. I would go out on the field after, the captains would go out and flip the quarter, do all that stuff, pick their side. I would go out, the parents would all cheer, and the music might be playing. And I remember this home game. I was so excited for this home game. It was like the third or fourth game of the season. And coach calls for all of the starters to get up. And so I get off the bench, stretch my neck. All right, I take one step, and coach does this. He holds his hand up, and his eyes drift from me to the bench, and he points at a freshman. A freshman. He's that freckle-faced little peach fuzz kid on the right. I'm surprised he didn't break the camera. He points to a freshman named John. Who names their kid John, by the way? Like, John's the name of a toilet. You flush a John, you port a John. John's the name of somebody nobody knows or cares about, a body who washes up on shore. Who is it? John Doe, I don't know. Oh, here comes Johnny come lately. I mean, it's the name of a person that you don't really need them to do anything. You just need their John Hancock. Just go ahead and scribble this. I mean, who names their kid John? And so he points at the freshman John, and he sticks his hand up at me. And for most of the rest of the season, I sat on the bench, and I'll never forget the humility of filling up little 2-ounce water cups for John, the freshman that got to start instead of me. It was humiliating. Now, this has happened to you, right? I think this has happened to all of us at some point. Maybe it happened to you when you were very young. You were the center of attention. You were the firstborn. Mom had another baby, and all of a sudden, Dad's attention was sucked up by the baby. Mom's attention, grandparents, everybody cared about the new baby. They brought him new toys and so on and so forth. And listen, you were cute, but your little sister, she's cuter. What are you going to do? Maybe you're a mom and you like to go to the park and you're very social. You're a connecting kind of person. You're very hospitable. You bring all the snacks for all the kids. And there's this kind of mom's group that meets up at the park, and you're the one that gathers them and initiates and texts everybody. You gather everybody together. You find out about this new mom that's in the community, and oh, you're a new family. You should come to the park and meet the other moms. You're the hospitable one. But all of a sudden, after a few weeks go on, she becomes the popular mom. She brings the good snacks, right? All the moms start going to her for advice, and they do their little gossip sessions off on the side, and you're kind of left out in the dust. And hey, you're the social one. You're the hospitable one, but she's better. She sells Mary Kay and essential oils. I mean, she's just better. Or maybe you've been working at your company for a long time. I mean, you've been there for well over a decade. You've got the golden watch or whatever comes with working there for a long time. And you know how things work. You know how the company actually functions. You know how to actually get the job done. You've been telling management for years, hey, these are the problems. This is what you got to do. They don't listen to you. They don't promote you. And all of a sudden, one day, they announced your new boss. It's this kid half your age. He's the age of your kids. And he walks in. He's your new boss. He walks in with his kombucha and his avocado toast. What's going on here? You've been there longer, but you know what? He's better. That mom, she's better. So here's the question that all of us at some point will face. What should you do when someone is better than you? Sometimes that happens. Today we're going to see two different approaches that happen. One is by King Saul, one is by his son, the prince, Jonathan. So let's look at King Saul and his approach. His approach is basically this: plot their failure. What should you do when someone's better than you? Well, one approach is to plot their failure. Let's pick up our reading and look at verse number 9, 1 Samuel 18, verse 9. From that time on, Saul kept a close eye on David. The next day, an evil spirit from God came forcefully on Saul. He was prophesying in his house while David was playing the lyre. The lyre is like a small harp portable, as he usually did. And Saul had a spear in his hand. How convenient. He hurled it, saying to himself, I will pin David to the wall. That escalated very quickly. But David eluded him twice. Twice he tried to throw a spear at him. Saul was afraid of David. Well, that's interesting. Because the Lord was with David and had departed from Saul. So he sent David away with him and gave him command over 1,000 men, and David led the troops in their campaigns. I mean, this is really an attempt on his murder. David is not very experienced. He's a young man. Surely if I put him in charge of a bunch of men, his ego is going to get the hold of him, and he's going to lead the troops into battle. I'll put him in the heat of the battle. It's a murder attempt, basically. It backfires, though, because in verse number 14, in everything that David did, he had great success. Why? Well, because the Lord was with him. And when Saul saw, bit of a tongue twister, how successful David was, he was afraid of him. All Israel and Judah loved David because he led them in their campaigns. Now, before we go on, I want to pick out one verse that kind of catches all of our attention. Verse number 10. The text here says that an evil spirit from God came forcefully on Saul. So real briefly, there's two different interpretations here. I just feel like it's important to go over this. One interpretation is that God caused or allowed a demon to possess Saul. Another interpretation is that God caused or allowed Saul to experience some sort of misery, okay? And so I believe the second interpretation is the correct one. If we can go to the next slide, I'll just show these different interpretations that are up here. I believe number 2 is the correct interpretation. Here's kind of a brief explanation why. So first off, the key is how you interpret the word spirit. So in the Old Testament and in the New Testament, in Hebrew and in Greek, the word spirit is used in a bit of an ambiguous way, okay? So in Greek, it's pneuma, and Hebrew, it's ruach. I wasn't great at Hebrew, but I can almost pronounce that word. In both times, it can be interpreted or translated as a spirit of some sort, like an angelic being or a demon. It can also be translated or understood as breath or as wind. In other instances, here's a prime example. 1 Timothy 1, God has not given us the spirit of fear. In Exodus, there's someone that has the spirit of skill. Someone else has the spirit of jealousy. There's a spirit of confusion in Isaiah 19. The word is used in different ways, so that's one reason. The second reason is it seems like God has given Saul several chances to change his behavior. And throughout Scripture, we see that when people do not repent of their sin and change their behavior, one of the ways that God deals with that is he hands them over. He allows them to just be consumed by natural consequences. He allows them to be consumed with their own lust or jealousy or whatever it is. There's some other reasons that I won't get into, but I believe number 2 is the correct interpretation. However you interpret this, what is clear is that God is in full control of this spirit of jealousy that has gripped Saul. And he's allowing Saul to be just in absolute misery because of his jealousy and his envy. Here's a famous picture of Saul in emotional distress, a famous oil painting by Ernest Josephson. Research tell us that there's really 2 parts to jealousy. One part is that there's a fear of loss. And the second part is that there is a threat to your self-image. And so Saul, in this condition, he's fearing that he's going to lose the kingdom. He's fearing that he's going to lose his position. Someone else is going to take it. He wants to hold on to that. There's also a threat to his self-image. Over and over in the text, it says that Saul fears David. He's not scared of David because David's like strong and burly and can arm wrestle him to the ground. He's scared of David because he's scared of his self-image being taken away. Saul probably has these dreams of one day as an old man strolling into the capital city, and there's his statue. And there's the statue of his son, and now his grandson is being coronated as the new king, and people are bowing to him because he's got this dynasty, he's got this legacy, he's got this thing that he fulfilled that people appreciate him for and love him for. And if he's not the king, and if his son doesn't become the king, if he doesn't have a dynasty, who is he anymore? There's a fear of loss, and there's a threat to his self-image. And there's several things that jealousy does to us, and envy is closely related. Here's a couple of things that we see in the text. Number 1, here's what jealousy does to us. Your mental health suffers, okay? So a lot of health experts, they make a differentiation between mental illness and mental health. I don't know which Saul is suffering from here, but obviously his jealousy is affecting his mental health. It's just driving him absolutely bonkers. And he just goes down the tubes from this point on. Here's a quote from William Shakespeare. "Oh, beware, my lord, of jealousy. It is the green-eyed monster which doth mock the meat it feeds on." That's from Othello. Jealousy can be like a green-eyed monster that just torments you and just messes with your mind. Secondly, here's something that jealousy does to us. Our peers suffer. Our mental health suffers also. Our peers suffer because we begin to act like a different person. Let's continue reading in verse number 17. Saul said to David, Here's my older daughter, Merab. I will give her to you in marriage. Only serve me bravely and fight the battles of the Lord. For Saul said to himself," that's what he said to David. Here's what he says to himself, "I will not raise a hand against David. Let the Philistines do that." But David was humble about the whole thing. Here's what he says. He says, "Who am I and what is my family or my clan in Israel that I should become the king's son-in-law?" So when the time came for Merab, Saul's daughter, to be given to David, she was given in marriage to Adriel of Meholah. Saul has already been manipulating his staff and the people that are in his administration. Now he's even using his own daughter as a pawn in his little chess game of jealousy against David. The story goes on. He's going to continue again with his other daughter. Look at verse 20. Now Saul's other daughter, Michal, was in love with David, and they told Saul about that. He was pleased. "I will give her to him," he thought, "so that she may be a snare to him." He has high expectations of his daughter. "So that the hand of the Philistines may be against him." So Saul said to David, "Now you have a second chance to become my son-in-law." Then Saul ordered his attendants, "Speak to David privately and say, 'Look, the king likes you and his attendants all love you. Now become his son-in-law.'" They repeated these words to David, but David said, "Do you think it's a small matter to become the king's son-in-law? I'm only a poor man and I'm little known." Question, what does being a poor man have to do with becoming the king's son-in-law? Well, in those days, there was a dowry that was expected, or a bride's price that was expected. If you were a young man about to marry a woman, you would pay her father a dowry. And if her father was wealthy, the expectation is that the dowry or the bride price would be very high. Now, David is a poor man, as he explains. And the person's daughter that he's trying to marry is the king, so he's obviously wealthy. David just does not have any kind of remotely sufficient dowry or bride price to marry Saul's daughter. Now, the next part gets a little crude if you have little kids with you. I don't know, distract them for about 30 seconds here. Verse number 24. When Saul's servants told that to David, said what David had said, Saul replied, "Okay, say to David, the king wants no other price for the bride than 100 Philistine foreskins to take revenge on his enemy." Saul's plan was to have David fall by the hands of the Philistines. Once again, this is a murder attempt on David's life. The Philistines are not going to willingly give their foreskins away, and so he's trying to lead David into the enemy territory and have him killed by the Philistines. He has roped in not only his daughter, his other daughter, his attendants, now his army, because David has men that report to him as commander. He's roped in his army into his little pawn chess game. There's other people that are suffering because of his jealousy and envy. This is what jealousy can do to us. Song of Solomon 8:6 says this, "Love is strong as death, but jealousy is fierce as the grave." So what does jealousy do to us? Our mental health suffers. Your peers suffer. Also, your reputation suffers. We don't have time to read everything in the middle here, but let's skip all the way to the end of chapter 19, the end of this text that we're studying today. Look at 19, verse 23. "So Saul went to Naioth at Ramah, but the Spirit of God came even on him, and he walked along prophesying until he came to Naioth. He stripped off his garments." There's this picture of, it's not just his clothes, it's also his kingly garments and his crown. He's taking off, he's not fit to be king anymore. And so the author's trying to make this parallel between when Jonathan takes his priestly stuff off, or princely stuff off, and puts it on David at the beginning of chapter 18. And now Saul is taking his stuff off willingly. He's not fit to be king anymore. He stripped off his garments, verse 24. "And he too prophesied in Samuel's presence. He lay naked all night and all day and all that night. And this is why people say, 'Is he also among the prophets?' Here we see a prime example that the emperor has no clothes." Saul the king is curled up in the fetal position all night, crying in misery. He's completely lost it. And those who are around him, those who report to him, those who serve him, those who are supposed to honor him and serve him as king, they've lost all respect for him, all confidence in him. And here's what they begin saying. Is Saul a prophet now? I knew he was the king. He's not a very good one. Is he trying to be a prophet now as well? He tried to be a priest earlier, and that didn't go. Well, what is Saul doing? His reputation is completely tanked and in the trash now because of the way he's acting. This is what jealousy does to us. Your mental health suffers, your family and your peers suffer, your reputation suffers. Understandably, Saul is feeling jealous, but jealousy has a dark side. It messes with your emotions, and it causes you to act in a way that you normally would not if you had more confidence in yourself. So back to our original question. What should you do when someone is better than you? What should you do when someone is better than you? Maybe you're a teacher, a professor, and you've been working to get things published, but one of your coworkers, one of your colleagues gets published, and now you're wondering, oh man, does that mean my tenure is up for debate? Does that mean that they're going to get promoted instead of me? And well, they got published. Perhaps they are better than you. Maybe you're a coworker and you have been working at the company, at the firm for a long amount of time, and you've both been putting in the hours and earning clients, and you were hoping to make partner, but then your coworker makes partner, and they get the raise, and they get the prestige, and now you're wondering, man, am I going to have to move in order to get the role that I want? What's happening here? They got partner. Maybe they're better. Or maybe you're a college graduate. You just did the graduation ceremony. You got the cards. You turned the tassel. Congratulations. That was a lot of work. And you went to class with a lot of peers. You made friends with people that were majoring in the same things. They were applying for the same jobs that you've been applying for. They made the same kind of grades that you did. And all of them are posting that they've gotten the job that meets the description of the field that they studied. And you're working fast food still. You're trying to get a job at Hershey Park. You're cutting grass for people. You have not been able to get the job that they have that matches your college degree, and they must be better than me. What should you do when you encounter someone who's better than you? Well, one approach that we've seen is to plot their failure. This was Saul's approach. It did not work well for him. The second approach is this, to praise their success. You can either plot their failure or you can praise their success. This is Jonathan's approach. Let's take a look at how this goes for Jonathan. Look at chapter 19. Saul told his son Jonathan and all the attendants to kill David. But Jonathan had taken a great liking to David, and he warned him, hey, my father Saul is looking for a chance to kill you. Be on your guard tomorrow morning. Go into hiding and stay there. I will go out and stand with my father in the field where you are, and I'll speak to him about you, and I'll tell you what I find out. Jonathan then spoke well of David to Saul, his father, and said to him, let not the king do wrong to his servant David. He's not wronged you, and what he has done has benefited you greatly. He took his life into his hands when he killed the Philistine. The Lord won a great victory for all Israel, and you saw it, and you were glad. Why then would you do wrong to an innocent man like David by killing him for no reason? Once again, here's our three characters in the story today. We have King Saul, and then we have Jonathan. Like I said, Jonathan is of royal descent. He's cut his teeth in the military. He's proven to be a great leader. He's proven to be bold. He's proven to be unconventional. He almost single-handedly won a battle for Israel just a few chapters earlier that we don't have time to get into. He is the obvious fit for the next king. And there are two people here that should be or could be threatened by David. There are two people here that could or should have a sense of loss or a threat to this young man, because here's a guy who's younger but better than both of them. I want you to notice what Jonathan focuses on as opposed to Saul. In chapter 8, verse 19, it says that from that day on, Saul kept a close eye on David. His eye, his gaze, his attention, his focus is on David, his competition. Jonathan, on the other hand, look at what he says in chapter 19, verse 5. He's talking to his father and says, look, the Lord won a great victory for Israel. You saw it. Shouldn't your attention, shouldn't your eyes, shouldn't your gaze be focused on the greater good and on the battles that have been won? Shouldn't your gaze be on that instead of on David as a comparison, as competition? Comparison. Let's talk about comparison for a little bit. I like to swim laps in the pool. Does anybody like to swim laps in the pool? Okay, nobody. David, you like to swim laps. Okay, so one person, and Janice, I think you do too, right? Okay, two people. I enjoy swimming laps. It's good exercise, easy on the joints, and even when I'm at the public pool here, and it's loud, when your head goes underwater, all you can hear is blah, 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 or whatever, water going past your ears. So I enjoy it. It's relaxing. You focus on the blue strip at the bottom of the pool. My mind, I can exercise, but then my mind just kind of loses focus, and I'm able to just let my mind drift. And that works pretty well until somebody starts swimming in the lane next to me. It's like all my attention. I don't know who this person is. If I see David jump in the pool next to me, I just leave because there's no way I can keep up. But normally there's somebody next to me that's a total stranger. And again, I'm not super athletic or whatever. I just try hard. And so people pass me. And I always find myself like racing. It doesn't matter. We're not in a race. It's not Katie Ledecky over here, right? But I just feel like I should pick up my pace, and my form starts going out of whack because I'm just trying, and then I burn out quickly because I'm trying to swim. Like, why am I comparing myself to someone that is a total stranger? It's just it's a natural thing for naturally all of us compare ourselves with other people. Now, experts do tell us that there are two different ways that comparison can go, okay? There is malicious comparison, and there is benign comparison, some researchers say. One makes us unhappy, the malicious kind. The other actually has the potential to make you a happier person. That is benign comparison. One fills you with shame as if you don't measure up to the person swimming next to you. The other one actually helps you see someone that is successful and you try to become more like them. You try to model yourself after them. In this case, maybe your stroke pattern or whatever. One makes you happy. One makes you unhappy. One makes you want to eliminate the person that is on the top so that you can keep your position. The other makes you want to become a better version of yourself. There's malicious comparison and benign comparison. Another way to look at it is, one approach is to plot someone else's failure, and the other is to praise their success and to learn what you can from this person who so-called is threatening you. And of course, I believe in the story, the text, the author is intentionally pinning Saul against David to show the comparison of how they deal with this jealousy, this envy, this threat to the throne. Here's a couple of reasons why I believe you should pick number 2, even if you're not a believer. Envy and jealousy are just no fun. They're no fun. Now, there's other negative emotions that are fun for a little bit, right? When you're angry and you just explode, you scream into a pillow, you punch it like you punch a wall. It's fun for a split second, and then your hand hurts or whatever. Like, it's not good after, but at least for a moment, it's fun. Lust and greed, they're fun for a little bit, and they end up becoming a train wreck. But at least for a little bit, they're fun, right? Laziness can bring pleasure for a little bit because you're lazy, and the procrastination, it ends up getting you in the ditch. But for a moment, it's pleasant. Anger and jealousy, from start to finish, it's none of it's fun. None of it's fun. You should pay attention to the story and the way that Jonathan handled it. But secondly, if you're a Christian, all of us realize, if you're a believer, that in eternity, God is less concerned with what we accomplish in this life, and he's more concerned with the kinds of people we become. God does want you to accomplish something. I'm not saying he doesn't care if you actually do anything profitable in this life. He does. He wants you to accomplish something. But he's less concerned with what you accomplish and more concerned with the kind of person that you become. And through the rest of eternity, you will spend the rest of eternity worshiping and praising someone who is better than you, Jesus Christ. Better than you in every single situation. Why not practice this? Why not practice praising and trying to model yourself and learning from those who are better than you right now? Because for the rest of eternity, we're going to be doing this. We're never going to be better than Jesus. All of us have moments where we encounter someone better than us. All of us have been jealous and envious. Believe it or not, J.R. Tolkien, he was envious of C.S. Lewis. C.S. Lewis is pumping out books like crazy, and Tolkien is rewriting chapters of Lord of the Rings over and over and over and over and over again. He was envious. Antonio Salieri was envied Mozart. Every one of us has experienced jealousy and envy at some point. Maybe it's the kid in class she's just smarter than you. Her science fair project went first. She's just better. Maybe it's that freshman athlete that takes your place. He's John. Oh, sorry. It has an effect on me. He's just better. He was better. Maybe it's that rival dad. He's just like Bluey's dad. He's just like Bandit. How is he so perfect? He's just better. He's just better. Maybe it's your new boss that's half your age with his avocado toast. He's just better. What if you could learn to praise their success instead of plotting their failure? What if you could learn to look at this person and be happy for the greater good that's being accomplished? What if you could look at this person that's better than you and be inspired to be a better person yourself as opposed to trying to plot their demise? What if you could feel motivated to be a better person by them as opposed to seeing them as an enemy? What if you could do that? Unfortunately, I don't have a personal success story. I wish that I could go back to the story of John on the soccer field, but I didn't handle that well, so I don't have a personal success story. But I do have a friend that gave me permission to share his story. So I have this friend who, his company, his organization, several months ago, hired a consultant to come in and just kind of evaluate and poke at the organization and see where they could improve and stuff. At the end of what I'm assuming is several interviews and observing things and looking at metrics and different measurements and scales and stuff like that, the consultant came in with this executive report, and there were a few different suggestions. But the main suggestion, the main focus of the report pointed at my friend. You see, my friend was really the supervisor of almost all of the employees of the company. He was pretty high up and still is high up in the organization. But the consultant basically said this, that this guy, he's non-confrontational, he's not good at goal setting, and he's not good at keeping and holding employees accountable to the goals that have been set. And so the advice, one of the primary pieces of advice from the consultant was, you need to basically demote this guy and raise up from within the company or hire from without someone else that can compensate for him and do the job that he's not good at. That was basically the suggestion given by the consultant. A few months ago, this happened very recently. So a few months ago, I called my buddy on the friend, and I find out this is happening, and I'm, hey, how are you feeling? I mean, boy, that's a threat. That's a threat. That does not feel good. He said the feedback was hard. He instantly wanted to make excuses. He wanted to point the fingers at other people. Well, this is why they said that, and that's not true, because he wanted to do all that. But here's what he said. My friend's a believer, and so here's what he said. He said, Nick, I've always held this job with an open hand. I didn't necessarily apply for it. I was asked to take the position. I've been in it for a few years now. I've always held this job with an open hand. I believe God gave me this opportunity. If God wants to take this opportunity away and give it to somebody else, he honestly said, I really do hold this job with an open hand. I talked to him this last week, just a couple days ago, and I asked him kind of what the update was, because the company had actually picked out 2 or 3 people in the organization to promote over him. So there were names of people that were possibly going to take his position. And I asked him kind of what the update was, and the story actually worked out pretty well for him. I believe because of his humility, the board of his organization actually decided to leave him in his spot, to leave those other employees in their spot, and they're going to hire an executive coach to come in and train him on these different things for about a year and a half, something like that, to see if he can improve these different areas of what he does for work. Now, when someone better than you comes along and you handle it in a humble way, it may not always work out. Okay, there's no promise that things work out. It happened to work out for my friend. But I did remember thinking, I wish I could be more like him. I wish that when someone is better than me coming up the ranks, I wish that I could just see the greater good to the organization or to the, whatever the piece of my life is. I wish I could see the greater good that's happening. I wish I could learn from my competition and have benign comparison, not malicious comparison. I wish that I could really hold different areas of my life with an open hand, honestly. Here's one other way to put it. This is someone who wrote about the story of Jonathan and Saul, Breaking the King Saul Syndrome by Jonathan Martin. At the end of his book, he says, "It is time to let go of the crown, to give ourselves and our earthly kingdoms away so we can advance the kingdom of God." And I believe that's the sort of story that Jonathan would encourage us to take, even though he does not become king later on.